Just leaving the risk out, the expense was huge. Let's now switch focus to Baghdad and the Green Zone from the Cobb and Basra Palace. How was it for you?
Well, I got outside of the Green Zone probably 3 times in my time there, out into the Red Zone, easier going down to Basra, and then one other visit outside of Baghdad into Anbar.
That's 3 times in a bit under a year.
Yes. I think the better marker is probably the consultants we worked with. Again, I fully take the line that Rob has taken, but the constraints that our consultants were under, they would go, for example, into the Council of Representatives, into the Parliament, and they would be working with the Economic Affairs Committee. They couldn't have routine meetings. They couldn't set those meetings up particularly in advance. They couldn't stay there for longer than an hour or an hour and a half. Their transport bookings had to fit into a very complicated matrix of transport bookings and security patrols. So we were trying to provide quite complicated and quite intensive capacity building under very, very constrained circumstances. But, as Rob has said, it was by no means perfect, but in those circumstances we were doing quite well. I think the real thing though is that it did make you constantly make that calculation. Is this worth it? For every move that involved security you had to say, how important was this? Was it worth risking the lives of those people and the team that went out with them? So you actually did think through for many more activities than you ever did in any other context. What is the return on this? You also did that for how many people you had in country, and that was most noticeable in about a week's period in March 2008, when there were 100 and something rockets landed in the international zone, 3 of which landed in the embassy. We went to a dress state. Dress states were how much body armor you have to have, which meant that walking between your pod and the canteen, you had to wear your body armor and a helmet. And we, John and myself and a few others, sat down and said, we actually need to work out a protocol for this. How many people is it worth having here under those sorts of circumstances? So this point about trying to make the calculation as to safety-wise and expense-wise, is it worth it? You are doing that much more explicitly in this context than anywhere else.